So, good morning, everyone. I am Ronaldo KAYABYAB Jr. here to present the financial reporting. So, let's start. So, what is the purpose of financial statements? So, first is financial statements are a structured representation with the objective of providing information about the financial position, financial performance, and cash flow of an entity that is useful to a wide range of users in making economic decisions. Financial statements also show the result of the management stewardship of the resources entrusted to do it. To meet to meet the objective, financial statement provide information about an entity's asset, liabilities, income and expenses, other changes in equity and cash flows. So when we say financial statement, it's structured representation. Yun yung naka-arrange siya. It means na it is according to plan, based according to plan. Tapos nakaayos siya. For example, di ba sa financial position or balance sheet, ganon, di ba mayroong nakalagay yung assets, liabilities, and owner's equity. It is to provide information which is reliable and relevant for them na hindi magkaroon ng misinformation which is magagamit in the next events. Tapos, ay next, transactions. Yung financial statement also, doon nakikita on how the management, kung paano sila gumastos, or how much is their liabilities, how much assets they have. Tapos, yung mga capital which is used. To, to meet the objective, dapat daw yung meron tayong asset, liabilities, income, and expenses. Dapat naka-provide yun. Tapos, doon sa cash flows naman, doon malalaman kung kung how much yung cash flows during the period. So, next slide. Okay. So, syempre, when doing financial statements, there are overall considerations. First is the fair presentation and compliance with international financial reporting standard. Dapat the financial statement shall present fairly the financial position, performance, and cash flows of the entity. It means na, syempre, if you are providing financial statements fairly, dapat for you to provide a reliable informations. Dapat, syempre, hindi kailangan may misinformations na ilalagay. Tapos yung dapat it is complying with the IFRS or the reporting standards ng financial statements. So the next one is going concern. Going concern financial statements should be prepared on a going concern basis and unless management intends to liquidate liquidate the entity or cease trading or has no realistic option but to do so. So when we say going concern, it is the company that has the resources needed to continue operating indefinitely until it provides evidence to the contrary. This terms also refers to the company's ability to make enough money to stay afloat or to avoid bankruptcy. Para doon sa going concern, di ba, dapat for us to know when we'll be avoiding bankruptcy. And then sabi naman ito, unless management intends to liquidate the entity or cease trading or has no realistic option but to do so. Kaya, syempre, pag bankrupt na, wala nang going concern. Next is the accrual basis of accounting. Entity shall prepare its financial statements except for cash flow using the accrual basis. When we say accrual basis of accounting, it's an accounting method where revenue or expenses are recorded when a transaction occurs versus when payment is received or made. This method followed the matching principle, which says that revenues and expenses should be recognized in the same period. So, yun yung, di ba may cash basis tas may accrual basis. O pag accrual basis, sabi niya dito, yun nga, yung when revenues are recorded when transaction occurs versus when the payment is received or made. Yun yung accrual basis. Pag cash basis naman, refers to a major accounting method that recognizes revenues and expenses at the time cash is received or paid out. Ito naman, pag cash basis, pag nabayadan, pag may natanggap ng money. So let's go to the materiality and aggregation. An entity shall present separately each material class of similar items. Material items that are similar in nature or function should be separately disclosed. Yung materiality, sabi niya dito, separately each material class of similar items. For example, current assets or the PPE. It means na pag materiality it's classified in their similar, while those undissimilar separately disclosed naman siya. So asset and liabilities, income and expenses unless required, or hindi mo pwedeng i-offset ang asset and liabilities mo. Next slide. So the frequency of reporting and comparative information. So when we are doing yung financial statements, it means annually, dapat annual year, or an entity shall present with equal prominence its financial statements in a complete set of financial previous period. Meron yung, di ba, pag may mga makikita tayong FS na, for example, nakalagay dito sa kabila 2018 tas may 2019. So may comparative informations yung mga yun. To know kung yung asset ba ay nadagdagan, yung liabilities ba ay nabawasan, ganun. So for the consistency of presentation, an entity shall retain the presentation and classification of items in the financial statements in successive periods unless an alternative would be more appropriate or an IFRS requires a change in presentation. Dapat, when we are presenting, there is consistency para hindi magkagulo-gulo yung information na ibibigay natin. Next is identification of the financial statement. An entity shall clearly identify the financial statements and distinguish them from other information in the same published document. So when we are identifying the financial statement, we should know if this is for cash flows, this is for balance sheet, ganun, or changes in equity. Next. Okay. So an entity shall clearly identify each financial statement and the notes. An entity shall display the following information prominently. First, syempre, name of the reporting entity. Hindi pwedeng walang pangalan. Syempre, kailangan yun. Second, whether the financial statement are of the individual entity or a group of entities. Third, the date of the end of reporting period or the period covered by the set of statements or notes. Second, kung ano yung currency na ginamit and the level of rounding used in presenting amounts in the financial statements. Those are needed. Ito, di ba, for example, sa balance sheet, makikita natin name, Gloria Diaz. Tapos, sasabihin nun kung sole proprietorship ba siya, kung mag-isa niya lang, or entity ba. Tapos yung date, kung ano yung covered period. Tapos makikita kung peso or dollars. Tapos yung rounding off na ginamit. Next po. So, these are the complete sets of financial statements. For revised International Accounting Standards or IAS number 1, presentation of financial statement, a complete set of financial statements comprises the following. A, financial position as at the end of the period. Next is the financial performance for the period. A statement of changes in equity for the period. A statement of cash flows for the period. Yung financial position, it is the balance sheet. While the financial performance, I think it's the income statement, to be clear. Yes, or balance sheet siya. Tapos yung notes comprising a summary of significant accounting policies used and other explanatory information. Tapos as last is the statement of financial position as at the beginning of the earliest comparative period when an entity applies and retrospectively or makes a retrospective statement of items in its financial statement or when it reclassifies items in financial statements. So, yung mga yan ay complete sets of financial statement. Balance sheet, syempre yung financial position, nandun yung asset, liabilities, and owner's equity. That yung asset ay, di ba asset equals liabilities plus owner's equity, dapat magbabalance. Next, yung income statement, nandun yung sales like that on how income of it is a profit or loss yung naganap sa period. Tapos yung changes in equity, a statement of cash flows, yun yung may investing, operating, and financing activities. Notes, which can be direct or indirect method. Yung notes, yung comprising yung mga summary of significant accounting policies na ginamit. Tapos yung statement of financial position, magagamit lang siya pag nag-apply ng retrospective statements of items sa financial statements. Okay, next. Parang ito, this is an example of a statement of financial, ito profit, ano siya, partial income statement or financial performance. So, ito yung kinuha sa book. The profit is 300,000. Tapos, Aguilar and Porras, so dalawa sila. So, ang sinabi doon, division of profit is equally. So, when we are writing the division of profit, kailangan ang sabi equally. So, 300 i-divide sa 2. Equal siya. So, partner Aguilar, 150,000. And partner Porras, 150,000 also for the total of 300,000. That is the division of profit. For the year ended December 31, 2018. Next. Okay. As a minimum, the statement of financial performance shall include items that present of the following amounts for the period. First is the revenue. Dito, financial performance. Second is the finance cost or minsan tinatawag nilang interest. Next is the share of profit or loss of associates and joint ventures accounted for using the equity method. Next is the tax expense, a single amount comprising the total of post-tax profit, gain or loss of the discontinued operation, and the post-tax gain or loss recognized on the measurement to fair value less cost to sell on the disposal of the assets or disposal groups constituting the discontinued operations. Next is the profit or loss. So in the profit or loss, each component of other financial performance classified by nature excluding amounts in below. Share of the other financial performance of associates and joint ventures. Letter C, total financial performance. So, yun yung mga included items presenting the needed for the financial performance. Not actually needed, yung mga makikita doon. Next. So, let's go to the statement of changes in equity. IAS requires an entity to present a separate statement of changes equity. So the statement must show first is the total comprehensive income for the period, showing separately amounts attributable to owners or the parent and to non-controlling interest. Dito makikita yung how much income is for the period and yung pag-separately showing yung separate amounts to the owners of the parents and sa non-controlling interest. Next is the effects of any retrospective application of accounting policies or restatements made in accordance with IAS 8 separately for each component of other comprehensive income. Dito yung yung pag nag-apply na ng retrospective application, paano yung nabago doon sa income. Letter C, reconciliation between carrying amounts at the end, beginning, and at the end of the period for each profit component of equity separately, disclosing profit or loss, other comprehensive income, transaction with owners, showing separately contribution by and distribution to owners and changes in ownership interest in subsidiaries that do not result in a loss of control. So yung other comprehensive income na may asterisk dyan, it is an item required to be presented either in the statement of notes. So dito naman sa statement of changes in equity, dito those are the required items in preparing the statement of changes in equity. Dapat we all know how to do the statement of changes in equity. We should provide again a reliable and relevant information when doing these financial statements. So, next slide. So, yung doon pa sa statement of changes and equity, the components of equity referred to above include, for example, its class or of contributed equity, the accumulated balance of each class of other comprehensive income and retained earnings, the amount of dividends recognized as the distribution to owners during the period, and the related amount per share shall be presented in either statement of the notes or the changes in equity. So, yung dito na tayo sa statement of changes equity na example. So, for the old investment, 400,000 tapos yung kay Aguilar yung 400,000 tapos 800,000 yung kay Porras. So, nag-additional si Aguilar ng 500,000. Tapos si Porras naman, wala siyang additional investment. So, ang total nun is 1,300 for the two of them. Ngayon, nag-withdraw si Porras ng 50,000. So, ibabawas yun kay Porras. So, ang withdrawals is 50,000. So, ang balances for each Aguilar, partners equity, Aguilar and Porras is 500,000 and then for Aguilar and 750,000 for Porras. So there is 1,250,000 pa na balances for for the partner's equity. Tapos, nagkaroon sila kanina ng profit na 150,000 each. So, naging 300,000 na. Ay, 300,000 yung profit. So, in total, yung profit yung in total ni Aguilar is 650,000 tapos 900,000 naman kay Boras. So, less temporary withdrawals na 60,000 doon sa dalawa na 60,000 equals 120,000 yung nabawas. So, ang partner's equity in this is for the year December 31 is 590 for Aguilar and 840 for Boras for a total of 1,430,000. So, yun yung statement of changes in partner's equity. Next. So, let's go to the statement of financial position. After all the components of financial statements, statement of financial performance along with the changes in partners for equity for the period have been properly presented, the presentation of the statement of financial position will present no major difficulty. The asset and liabilities will be presented in the position or the balance sheet as those of the sole proprietorship, but the owner's equity section should exhibit separately the capital balance of Aguilar and Boras na 590,000 and 840,000 respectively. Though some of the items are not familiar yet, per revised international accounting standards, number 1, so the presentation of financial statements as a minimum phase of the statement of financial position shall include these line items that present the following amounts. First is the PPE or yung mga land, building, yun yung mga PPE. Pero niline item na lang siya iisa, which is the PPE. For investment property naman, those are investment in associates, ganon. Nilagay siya sa investment property. Yung intangible assets, nandoon yung goodwill, copyright, patent, those are intangible assets. Next is the financial assets, excluding amount shown under H, E, H, and letter I, excluding yung amount ng investment accounted for using the equity method, letter H, trade and other receivables, and letter I, cash and cash equivalents. May sariling line item yung mga yan. Next is the biological assets. Those are yung mga raw, something like that. Yung, for example, ng biological assets are yung biological asset are those living animals and living plants. So for the living plants, nandun yung bearer plants or the produce growing on bearer plants and other plants. Sa living animals naman is, syempre yung mga, alam mo naman na yung mga living animals. Tapos, inventories, yung for example ng inventories are the raw materials were in process, finished good, and the overall whole. Tapos, cash and trade and other receivables, nandiyan yung account receivables. Tapos, cash and cash equivalents, yung cash. Cash in bank, petty cash fund. Asset held for sale, trade and other payables, provision, financial liabilities, excluding the amount of K, then other payables, and letter L, provisions. Next, current tax liabilities and current tax asset as defined in IAS 12, deferred tax liabilities and deferred tax assets as defined in IAS 12. liabilities included in disposal groups, tapos non-controlling interest presented within equity, and the last one is issued capital and reserves attributable to the parent, to the owners of the parent. So these are the line items in the financial position. Next, an entity must present a classified statement of financial position separating current and non-current asset and liabilities unless presentation based on the liquidity provides information that is reliable. IAS or past 1.60 in either case if an asset category combines amount that will be received or settled after 12 months with assets that will be received within 12 months or notes, disclosure is required that separates the longer term from the 12-month amount. So what are the current assets? Current assets are assets that are expected to be realized in the entities of normal operating cycle or 1 month, 1 year, held primarily for the purpose of trading. Those are the trading receivables or account receivables expected to be realized within 12 months after the reporting period. Next is the cash and cash equivalents unless it is restricted. So all other assets that are not mentioned or that are not classified in the current asset are non-current. So when we say current asset, it has the cash and equivalents, accounts receivable, prepaid prepaid expenses, inventory, and marketable securities. While we say non-current asset naman, nandito yung cash, surrender, value of life insurance, long-term investment, and tangible fixed assets such as patents, tangible fixed assets such as equipment and real estate, tapos goodwill. Ito yung mga non-current assets. So next slide. Current liabilities are those expected to be settled within the entity's normal operating cycle. Again, it is held for use of purpose of trading due to be settled within 12 months, for which the entity does not have the right at the end of the reporting period to defer settlement beyond 12 months. So pag we have a due and we settled it for 12 months, this is current liability. So examples of current liabilities are we have the accounts payable, short-term debt, dividends, and notes payable, as well as income taxes owed. Meron din yung bank overdraft, creditors, bills payables, advances, and deposit received. While other liabilities are not incurrent, yun yung mga hindi siya classified doon sa distinguishment ng current liabilities. So examples for non-current liabilities are we have the long-term borrowings, secured or unsecured loans, long-term lease obligations, deferred tax liabilities, provisions, derivative liabilities, other liabilities getting due after 12 months. It means na you are settling your due after 12 months. So hindi na siya nasa normal operating cycle na 1 year or 12 months. So it means na these are non-current liabilities na. So other example, nandun yung debentures, long-term loans, bonds payable, deferred tax liabilities, long-term lease again, and pension benefit obligation. So these non-current liabilities these are debts that can be paid after a year. So, yun po yung non-current liability. Thank you for listening.
That's all for today. Thank you for listening, guys. We really appreciate it. Have a great lunch. Sayonara.